Welcome to the Empowered Podcast, episode 34. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Ellery Wells, and today we're going to talk a little bit about personal branding. I had the pleasure of meeting my guest today, Arfan Qureshi, when we were in Las Vegas for New Media Expo. Just another one of those reasons why, guys, if you are not going to industry events, conferences, meeting other people, learning from them and connecting with them, you are missing out on a huge chunk of not only life, but a great way to help your business succeed. So like I just mentioned, today's guest is Arfan Qureshi. His podcast, his blog is all about personal branding. As you know, it's something I'm pretty passionate about and something that I fully believe in. Every single person on this earth has a personal brand, whether they realize it or not, whether they want to or not, whatever the situation may be, and you have one too. As you're listening to this, part of your brand is someone who, does personal development in the car or listening to headphones while they're jogging or running. Whatever you're doing right now, that's part of your personal brand. The guy or the girl who always has headphones in when they're walking down the hall, or the person who's always taking notes at their desk, or whatever it is, that's part of your personal brand. And if we're intentional about it, it can help us get us one step further to realizing our definition of success. So without further delay, we'll go right into the interview with Arfan. Stick around at the end. I've got a few links to share with you, a few updates, and a quick message. Here we go. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Empowered Podcast. I'm here with Arfan Qureshi, and Arfan is the founder of LionSage.com and LionSage, or the LionSage podcast. And his goal is to be an online resource dedicated to helping young professionals build a powerful personal brand. How are you this morning, Arfan?
Great, Ellery. How are you, brother?
Doing good. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for inviting me, man.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is you talk a lot about building, growing, developing, and polishing a personal brand. And that's one of the things that I'm pretty passionate about. It's one of the 3 pillars that I have on my blog. And when we met, again, another person that I've met at New Media Expo, we got to talking about the personal branding aspect of what you and I believe and what you're doing to help people with that. Can you give us a background of how this became a passion for you? And let's start there.
Yeah, good question. So basically, my background professionally is in leadership and organizational development. So I help young all professionals of all ages to become more effective in the workplace and really build their leadership skills. So when I was doing that, I was consulting in many different countries and clients. And what I noticed is a lot of young professionals have this struggle with really kind of getting out of their shell. Some of it is shyness, some of it is intimidation, but really making their voice heard in high profile meetings or situations, building a brand for themselves and really kind of making a dent into their world. But this kind of shyness and intimidation, something I saw a lot across different clients. And I myself started that way. When I first started professionally, I was very so introverted and so in my shell that I feared that if I say something dumb, then people are going to find out, oh, Arfan's a dummy, right? He's an idiot, so on and so forth. So that self-doubt is something that I struggled with starting off. I saw a lot of my clients struggling with, and I thought, you know what? This is something a lot of people need to talk about. We need to get it out there into the world and discuss it so we can not get over that.
Now, would you say you're still an introvert, or
No,
you just hide it better?
I'm actually pretty extroverted. I'm a pretty extroverted person. I do like my alone time sometimes to get back and reflect and write and all that kind of stuff to really build me up. But I'm very much an extrovert by nature. But I think it doesn't really matter what you are in a personality standpoint, introvert or extroverted. We all sometimes have that self-doubt of, am I smart enough? Am I good enough to add value to the world? And if you doubt that, then it's going to come out when you speak and talk, interact with other people. And so getting over that, no matter what your personality type is a struggle a lot of us have.
So let's come out with a bang. And how do you overcome that? Or what's the best tip that you have for getting out of your shell and facing the self doubt that you mentioned? And um, you know, you might have heard it too,
Hmm.
but the saying goes, "It's better to keep your mouth shut and have people think you're stupid than to say something and remove all doubt." Have you heard that before?
I've heard it before. It's a very interesting quote there. And that might seem like a lot of sense intuitively, but what I've found is if that comes from fear, if that comes from self-doubt of I have no value to add and you keep quiet, that's not helping anybody, right? And so here's my approach to kind of branding generally is people look at branding as I'm trying to change your perception of me. And I'm not sure I like that. And the reason why I don't like that is it implies that I'm trying to convince you of something that's not real, right? And so my approach to it is, first of all, branding is something that's almost already inside of us, right? It's your strengths, your values, your ideals, the needs you fulfill around you, and it's sort of already inside of you. So the challenge is, how do you clarify it? How do you be clear of what is the unique purpose of your brand and then live it every day? That's kind of my approach to it. So let me give you a quick example. You and I both were at NMX, the conference this year, and one of my favorite stories in the keynote was Scott Stratton. And were you there for that keynote, Ellery?
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite ones.
Wasn't that
It was
amazing? Wasn't
hilarious.
that he was so hilarious. But what I loved his point in one of his stories, if listeners weren't there, is he mentioned the story of a family that went to Ritz-Carlton as for a vacation and had a great time, and they went back home, and the son found out, oh wait a second, where's Joshi? Right, and Joshi is his stuffed giraffe. And so, of course, he goes into a tizzy and is all freaking out. And the father and the mother also freaking out because that's his favorite toy. So they call Rich Carlton and say, "My son has lost his stuffed giraffe, and he is very upset. We told him that he's on extended vacation, right? And uh, and so Rich Carlton says, "No, don't worry, sir. We're gonna find him and get it back to you." So he gets off the phone, tries to calm the child down by saying, "Don't worry, he's on an extended vacation. He's just having a good time." Ritz Carlton finds Joshi, right? They find the stuffed animal. They mail it back overnight, and when they get the package, he opens it up and looks at it and says, "Whoa, this is more than just Joshi. There's a letter and there's pictures and there's a letter from I believe it's the manager talking about Joshi's extended vacation. And there's pictures of him at the spa, at the pool, having a great time, getting a massage. And of course, the father tells everybody. And what I love about this story is, Ritz Carlton's not just saying, "Oh, this is going to be a great tweet, right? This is going to be great for our brand." Ideally, they know what they stand for. They stand for customer service and they live it every day. That's powerful. That's for me, that's branding versus just changing people's perception of you, which might not be accurate.
And to your point, it's more about showing people what you're about instead of just telling them.
Exactly. It's living it every day. So if you're clear about your unique purpose and why your brand exists, and you live it every day and you find ways to demonstrate it because that's what you believe in, right? That's a very different approach to branding than just saying, here's my brand. Let me talk about it a lot. Let me just share, why I'm so great. But the stories other people tell about you determine your brand. You don't. They
Mm,
tell you what your brand is because they've seen
hmm
you in action. They've seen you live the brand, and they talk about you, and your brand's out there in the world. You don't control it, but you control your actions. You control what you do on a daily basis that lives up to your beliefs.
Do you separate your brand or your personal brand from your reputation, or in your mind are they basically the same
To me,
thing?
it's the same thing. It's if you're living up to your brand, that's your reputation, that's what's out there. Branding is a way to talk about it in kind of the marketing lingo. in helping people understand that you are the CEO of your own company. Even though you might have a full-time career and you have no plans of being an entrepreneur, you are still the CEO of Arfan Qureshi Incorporated or Ellery Wells Incorporated. And that's a way to kind of think about it, but really it's back to your reputation. What are you known for? What do people come to you for on a consistent basis? And again, what's the unique purpose of your brand in the world?
So have you heard the phrase "perception is reality"?
I have, yes.
So what if the perception of you is something that you don't want as part of your personal brand? Do you think that you go in and say, "Hey, no, that's not me," or do you kind of stick to the actions, or actions speak louder than words
Yeah,
mentality?
for me, actions always speak louder than words. And I'm saying you definitely, in some points, you want to clarify, but it's got to be real, right? It's got to be authentic. The brands that last are real brands. They're authentic to their core beliefs. And the question again is, what do you stand for? If you stand for excellence in customer service and this amazing experience, then your actions have to show that every single day. And you've got to intentionally do that. Be proactive
Mm.
about it. But if you're just talking about excellence in customer service all day, tweeting about it and all this great communications, but you're not doing amazing things that people have to talk about, good luck.
Yeah, people can see through that stuff
Absolutely.
pretty
You
easily.
don't practice what
Actually,
you preach.
just yeah, exactly, just this morning, I'm writing an ebook to put up on Amazon, and I had asked for people to review it in one of the communities I'm in on Facebook, and for most of the part, I'm a stranger there. We don't, it's not a whole lot of interaction, but I put out a picture and I said, hey, if any, I'm writing this, I'm looking for people to review it. And I got 4 or 5 responses saying, yeah, that's cool. I'm doing something like that. I'd be happy to. Just message me. And I had started a conversation with those people. And then someone comes in and says, hey, this guy's a scammer.
Ooh,
This post should be blocked. I can't believe the moderators approved this.
wow.
And I had a few people sticking up for me
Yeah,
just because they knew I was a real person, and they knew what my brand was about.
right.
And I think that if you have this track record of your actions speaking louder than words,
Mm-hmm.
if someone comes in and does attack you,
Mm-hmm.
you'll have people stick up for you. And that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I ended up going in and saying, "Hey dude, I'm sorry. I'm not a scammer. Let's move
Mm-hmm.
on." And then I made sure to thank and tag everybody in that Facebook post. Thanks for responding, and I'll get back to you. But you're right. Your actions do speak louder than your words. But what about these platforms when you don't really get to show your actions necessarily? Because another ebook that I have out
Mm-hmm.
there, it's called the Personal Branding Toolkit. You
Mm-hmm.
can get it on my
Mm-hmm.
website, and it walks you through Facebook, LinkedIn, the resume building, and some of those things. But what about these online platforms like the ones I just mentioned, where you don't really, I mean, it's not like you're going to put up a video of you helping an old lady across the street. I know that's a bad example, but where it's all digital and you're communicating with people across the world or across the country,
Mm-hmm.
how do those play into your personal brand, and what kind of suggestions do you have for people wanting to build and develop themselves on those platforms?
Absolutely. So I think, even though we're using a different means and medium for communicating, so we're using podcasts and video and blogging, there's still what you've learned that you're teaching, right? We're all sort of teaching something, but that teaching is based on our experiences and what we have learned in the real world. A lot of young professionals, think, I'm not really into the online stuff. I don't need a brand, and I don't need a platform. My suggestion is you have a platform. You have people around you at work that know, like, and trust you. That's your platform. People will stick up for you, like you said. If someone's, hating on you, that's your platform. People that are raving fans of yours. Now, if when we go into an online format, that's just another means to communicate that. But hopefully, for example, when you're blogging or when you're talking to someone on Facebook, you are telling stories of how you have come to where you are, what you have learned at this point in your life. And you don't have to be, I heard your other podcast, Ellery, with I forget which one it was exactly. Maybe you can tell me. But hmm, yeah, totally forget who it was. But the person mentioned that you don't have to be at the finish line before you can teach about something. You have to be a couple steps
Right.
ahead, right? And we're all a couple of steps ahead in something because we've come overcome some challenges in our life. And if we can just teach someone else, here are the following things I did that got me here, that's valuable. And that is an authentic brand.
What would you say to the person who says, "Well, I don't really have a personal brand"?
Mm. You know, you have one, like it or not, because
I agree.
you have a reputation, right? It's
Yeah.
back to what are you known for, even if you're not online, even if you're not on any online social media format and medium, people know who you are in your life, your family, your friends, you have a reputation. But if you're not intentional about it, it's not going to be what you like, right? It's going to be something that is not very helpful for you from a personal or professional standpoint. So, what you and I both teach is be intentional, make sure that you know exactly what you stand for, and then now live up to it every single day of your life.
What would you say if there was one thing that people could do to enhance their personal brand or make sure that they've done? What would that be? Online, specifically
Especially
online.
online, I would say understand your strengths really well and become a thought leader. If you're a young professional and you think, well, who am I to teach about something? Or who am I to be a thought leader? You are a reference point for other people in your life, like it or not. But the question is, can you now convert that into an online format that can scale, right? The internet is amplification. It's a big, bullhorn. Now you can reach more people than ever. And if you use that effectively, understand your strengths and teach whatever you know works in real life, people will listen to you. You will get an audience and people will know, like, and trust you in the online format and you'll be successful.
What about using nicknames with a personal brand? What are your thoughts on that? I had someone ask me about
Yeah,
that, and I have a blog post. It may be live by the time this interview goes
right.
live, and if so, it'll be in the show notes.
hmm
But so I have my thoughts on that. But what do you think about using a nickname with your personal brand?
I'm not a big fan of it. I know some people do it for certain reasons. I'm sure there are good reasons for them. Personally, I am who I am. I'm Arfan Qureshi in real life and online. I've got, pictures of me kind of everywhere I am online. I'm a real person. That for me helps me build that trust with my audience. So there might be some situations where it's required. I'm not sure what they might be, but for me personally, if you want to build an authentic brand where people will trust you and potentially want to, buy your products or services later on, or really, even if they down your podcast, they're paying you with time. They're paying you with the time they could be doing something else. And so that for me, that trust is better built when they know I'm a real person, I'm a human being, I'm accessible, and the nicknames for me don't help that end goal personally.
Yeah, and to that, you brought up a couple of things that I wanted
hmm
to touch on. One is the picture. On your website up
hmm
in the header, there's your face. I have the same thing on mine.
hmm
And the same guy that was criticizing me on Facebook, he's got a picture, but his entire face is blocked out, and there's some like it's a white square with text in the middle. I don't remember what it said.
Right.
And then there's my picture with me and my wife.
Right.
So that's one of the if I had been asked that question
hmm
about the one thing, I would have said a picture.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. When you put up a picture, it just takes the personal connection really to the next level. Hey, I think the more that you can do
hmm
that, the more that you can show people that you're real. You go on
hmm
vacations or you do something stupid.
Yeah.
So that's why I put my wife and I went to Costa Rica in August for my birthday,
hmm
and I put up a picture of us next to the waterfall on my about page.
I
It wasn't
love
there
that.
for a long time,
Yeah.
but I was like, that's
It's
something
real.
that shows a little bit about exactly. It's real, and I think that's the key is just proving that you're real, and
And unfortunately, there's a lot of shady stuff on the internet. You and I know that a lot of new people that are getting into social media are learning that there's a lot of shady stuff. And so you have to find out, how do I bust through all the shady stuff and really represent something that is authentic. I'm trying to add value to the world, and I'm not just trying to make a buck. I really do want to make a difference in other people's lives. That will come back to you. When you build a brand based on giving and generosity and honesty and authenticity, all that good stuff comes right back to you. But you've got to have that faith that it will come back versus just trying to play, um, um, a a game of tricking people into paying you to do something.
Hmm. Yeah, you absolutely. And if you're a younger listener, or you're maybe an older or more experienced listener, but you're going into something new,
Hmm.
you really have to think, how can I give before I ask? And that's
Absolutely.
one of the mistakes that I see a lot of people that are just starting out with a blog or a podcast. um, they just get out of college and they just give me, give me,
Hmm.
give me, instead of figuring out how I can offer things.
One of the books that I love on just the whole social media and branding is called The Impact Equation by Chris Brogan and Julian Smith. Great book. And one of the metaphors I love, one of the first metaphors they mention is asking, are you a head of lettuce or are you an apple tree? A head of lettuce is disposable. It's going to go bad very soon if you don't eat it. An apple tree takes about 6 years to come to fruition, right? To get fruit from that. That's a long time you're investing in this apple tree. But then you have this yearly fruit. Every single year, you're going to get good stuff. You can use it for apple pies, you can use it for apple cider, whatever you want. But that's long term value you're getting. That's the same thing for a brand. If you're going to invest in your personal or professional brand, it's going to take a while. You're not going to monetize it, next week or next month. Add value, become a thought leader in your niche or field, and invest in it. And no, it's a marathon, it's a long-term effort. But when you get there, you're going to have an audience of raving fans that want to learn from you and that want to understand more of how you've gotten to your success. But that's going to be now something you can, for the long term, leverage for the rest of your career. But it takes that investment. It takes that,
Hmm.
I'm going to invest in the roots to build this or grow this apple tree that'll give me fruits long term.
Yeah. So, Arfan, one of the things I did whenever I worked at my corporate
Hmm.
job, I had read a story about, he's the head manager of VP. He was somewhere higher up in the
Hmm.
organization, and every meeting that he went into, he would have his coffee mug or water bottle or something. He would have his drink,
Hmm.
and he would have a notebook, and he would come in and he would put the cup down, put the notebook down, and with his pen, and that was his spot, and that was his authority position.
Hmm.
And everybody knew that that was what he did, and he'd come in and he'd be prepared for this meeting.
Hmm.
So I started doing the same thing. I had my big yellow Baylor University cup and my notebook and pen, and I would come in and I'm prepared for this meeting. I'm ready to get down to
Right.
business. Do you have a tip that someone can do, or an activity or something like that, that someone can do on a everyday basis throughout their week, to make these subtle improvements or tweaks to their personal brand?
I don't really have something specific that I do, or, and if I don't do it and find it works for me, I'm not going to, of course, advise on it. But, what I try to do is when I first get up in the morning at 5:30 a.m., I actually do a lot of writing and reflecting. And sometimes I'm reflecting on, what, again, is my purpose here? Why have I been given all these gifts and strengths and these things that I can now give back to the world with? And once I clarify and remind myself of that, I ask myself, what can I do today to help serve somebody else with this gift? And I do it. And it could be reaching out to somebody with an email and that's encouraging them. It could be stopping by someone's office and giving them a small, gift or some chocolate or something and talking about their vacation. But I'm asking myself, what can I do to serve with my strengths? And if I do that day after day and I relate to people and connect with them with my strength, they now come to me with questions about a certain field. And it could be professional development, leadership development, management. but now I'm the reference point for them. So I think there's value to having your style. But I think your style, for me, it comes authentically when you are yourself, when you don't kind of put the guards down, not trying to put up any other picture of you other than I'm trying to be useful and helpful to people around me, and do that a lot. Your
Yeah.
brand starts building and your reputation starts building, and people start saying, "Hey, you got a question about that? Go to Ellery, because man, he is so super helpful when I had that same challenge." And that just kind of it snowballs effects, and it gets to a point where people now look to you as a reference point.
Yeah, and you used a word earlier, and it's a big word for me, but the word is intentional.
Mm,
If you work in an office like I did, and there's 200 people on the sales floor, or whether you're a teacher and you're walking down the halls with other teachers or students,
mm-hmm,
you do develop this kind of brand, or
mm-hmm,
this little, maybe it's a little quirky thing. The guy that wears pants without a belt,
right,
or wears his brown shoes and black belt, or
right,
whatever. He
yeah,
he mixes and matches in something, and it may be accidental, but you do some of those things on a consistent
mm-hmm,
basis, and that becomes what you're known
mm-hmm.
for. And I think I think it's kind of it's a funny one,
It
but
is.
it's a great one for with Eric Fisher. He's always talking about bacon,
All right.
and in his
I
podcast
love that.
interview, he said, if they ever did a Super Bowl ad uh, having to do with bacon, I'm immediately what people will come to mind for. And he's been intentional about
Hmm.
it, and it's fun, and
Hmm.
he takes pictures eating bacon, and
Yeah.
it's really funny. But we do these things on a day-to-day basis, and if we continue to do them or day in and day
Hmm.
out, um, for better or
Hmm.
worse, those things become the things that we are associated with. So if
Yeah.
we tweak them to be the positive things, like you're saying, reaching out and connecting and encouraging, that becomes part of your personal brand. If you brought donuts to work every Friday,
Hmm.
you would quickly be known as the donut guy.
And actually have a story there is when I was
Okay.
consulting, I every day, and I was trying to really lose weight this time and really be healthier in my diet and exercise. So I would bring in snacks every day, and it would be really the healthy snacks. So celery, cucumbers, baby carrots, that kind of thing every single day. But before I, dig into my snacks, I would get up, walk around the department, and offer it to anybody and everybody. And after a while, people got to know me as the guy with the rabbit food, the guy that eats that healthy stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And they would tease me sometimes, like, "Hey, how's your rabbit food going?" It's like, "Great, I love it." But here's the thing: people don't tease you unless they know you can be teased, which is you have a relationship with them. They know that you can have fun with them. You're accessible. You're not this quote unquote expert in an ivory tower that is untouchable. So I agree. If you can have something where you are having something people can talk about, it's a conversation piece, right? It's something people can network around, and build this conversation with people around you. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and at the same time, I bet if you stopped doing that, or you would, instead of walking around, you just sat down to
Hmm.
eat, there would be people, whether they came up to you or not,
Hmm.
they'd be, well, what's wrong with Arfan?
Exactly.
You know, and that it's a good thing if you've if you work in a big office
Hmm.
and people are on the phone, there's probably a guy that talks really loud.
Right.
I mean, do you want to be the guy that talks really loud, or the guy that walks around, offering people healthy snacks in the afternoon?
Exactly.
Both of those things are they're fun, they're kind of silly, but you know, those are all of the examples that I just
Hmm.
mentioned, and the ones that those are real. And
Absolutely.
if you're listening to this and you think about your workplace, you've probably got that guy or that girl that does something really annoying and everybody talks about it. you
Right.
know
Right.
just be intentional with what you're doing. Don't, we're not going to talk about talking loud
No.
or whatever. Some people just talk loud, but
Yeah.
be intentional with what you're doing and how it impacts others, because all of that comes back to being part of your personal brand. Would you
Absolutely.
agree?
Absolutely. And I think the big thing there is, are you using your brand to connect to people? There's one thing about sitting down and thinking about your brand, and that's very useful. You should do that. But how is it connecting to people, real life people around you? That's going to now extend into your online brand, other things. But the whole celery and rabbit food kind of joke and story, really it was a way for me to have an excuse to build relationships every day. That was my reason. I did that, and it worked. People would find I would find a way to use that as a gateway into, hey, what's going on? How's your weekend? How's your vacation? How's your daughter doing? I know she broke her wrist. How's she feeling? You're building relationships. And really,
Absolutely.
relationships are one of the core aspects of building that brand because no one knows you. They're not going to want to refer to you for any other niche or topic or expertise you might have.
And I have a random question for
Go
you
for it.
before we go to some of my more standard ones.
Yeah,
For you, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
I
Actually,
noticed your Skype icon that had the Darth Vader helmet on
oh, I
it.
do. That was it was funny. I actually started watching Star Wars after I got married, which is crazy. And my wife thought I was nuts because I haven't watched Star Wars yet, but I watched all of them in like a 2 week period and I loved it.
So all the new ones and the
Yeah.
old ones.
Oh yeah. But
What's your favorite?
the last one was my favorite.
The episode 3 or episode 6?
The last one that was made, which was
The last new one?
yes,
The
which was that?
Darth Vader or how he becomes
Yeah,
Darth
that's the
Vader.
one. I don't
Yeah, a
remember what
lot
the
of
title is.
special effects. Revenge of the Sith,
That's
Rise
probably it. That's
something
probably it.
something with Sith in it.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was mine.
So, did you happen to hear that I think George Lucas now released, I think there was 9 or 10 books all in all, and they're going to make 7, 8, and 9 in the
I
next, I
heard
don't know,
that.
10
That
years.
is crazy. And I think Disney bought the franchise, right?
Yeah, and then they killed the video game.
Oh yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, they were going to do a bounty hunter video game that looked awesome.
Yeah, it
But
looked sick actually.
yeah, but they ended up. I'm pretty sure they just canceled the whole thing, and
Yeah.
there's big. Actually, they laid off the people. I think from Lucas
No
Arts,
way.
like 80% of them, and scrapped the video game.
Hmm.
And I don't
I
know,
didn't know that.
but I'm a big. I like both. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a preference. I kind of grew up watching Jean-Luc Picard
Oh yeah.
and in Star Trek, so, Arfan, being on the Empowered podcast, you might have guessed that we would talk about the word empower.
Hmm.
What does the word empower mean to you?
Good question. So for me, yeah, look at the core part of that word, which is power. Power is an ability to do something, right? We talk about the power of speech, which is the ability to speak. And kind of the prefix M, for me, it means sort of investing in or giving. So when I think about the word empowerment, I'm thinking, am I investing in the ability to do something, whether my own or somebody else's? So if I am empowering them, then I'm giving them the ability to do it, and hopefully the permission of to go out and do it. So when I do it in the workplace and I manage a team of mine, I try to empower them with here's the overall purpose, the vision. Go off and impress me. Go off and do it. Don't wait for a daily minute by minute plan where I'm going to set up for you to actually get it done. Because at the end of the day, that's not empowering you and giving you the space to impress me with what you have inside of you.
So, what is the best way to empower other people, or can you? Can you, and what is the
Hmm.
best way to?
Well, I think there's a few ways you can, but I think the best way that a mentor or several mentors of mine have empowered me is even though we all sort of have that nagging self-doubt of am I good enough? Am I smart enough? The best mentors, they believe in you so much that you start believing in yourself. That's empowering. When they know even though you might have challenges, that you might have this intimidation, they're like they believe in you so much. They're like, wait a second, why do you believe in me so much? And you start thinking, wait a minute, maybe I am capable of doing this. Maybe I can break through this challenge. Maybe I can, speak in front of this group in a confident manner. So that for me is the best way I've seen my mentors empower me.
So, I'm looking at your about
Hmm.
page. You've got at least one master's degree, or do you have
Two.
two?
Hmm.
And you've got a lot of schooling, and you've been in the workforce for a while
Hmm.
now. When you wanted to start the LionSage
Hmm.
podcast, what kind of resistance did you face? Because podcasting is becoming popular,
Hmm.
but I think it's popular, with our type of social groups,
Yes.
but it may not be popular outside of that too much.
Right.
Did you face any kind of resistance when you wanted to do something different?
Absolutely. I mean, every time I've made a major decision in my life, there's been some resistance. There's been that question of, is it going to be successful? Am I wasting my time? Is anybody going to listen? Right? And those questions come at you when you should be doing something, right? It comes at you when you are doing something big that you are not sure it's going to work out or not. And so the same thing, I was like, you know what? I'm not sure about this podcast. Is it going to work or not? People are going to listen to it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to quiet that censor, quiet that inner voice, go for it. If it doesn't work out, big deal. I'll move on, do something else. But if I don't try something and learn from it, then I'm not growing as a person, as a professional, and as a thought leader in the field and niche I'm trying to build that expertise in. And so, absolutely, there's resistance every time I do something big, but that makes me know that I should do it. It makes me know that I'm reaching the end of my comfort zone, and I tell myself, perfect, keep going.
And this might be a sensitive question,
That's
so let me
okay.
know. Plead the
Go
fifth
for
if
it.
you want to. So you had mentioned that, or just from knowing a little bit about your
Hmm.
background, you were born not in the United States, but you were raised here.
Yeah, so I was born in Kenya. So my father was a banker, and he opened up a branch of that bank in Kenya. And from there, we moved on to Barbados, Bahamas. But I actually grew up from kindergarten in Miami, Florida. So that's kind of where I 20 plus years grew up, went to University of Miami, and then moved on with my professional life and other graduate degrees. But yeah, and what's interesting is in my consulting, I went back to Africa and the Middle East. So, 20 plus, almost 30 years later, I am consulting in places like Kenya, Bahrain, Kuwait, Egypt, and kind of revisiting some of those places and learning about those places and cultures and languages in my adult life versus when I was younger.
Have you faced any kind of, and this is the
That's
sensitive part,
okay.
have you faced any kind of issues, over the last, I guess, 15 years
Hmm.
ago, our relationship with the Middle East and having a name like Arfan
Hmm.
Qureshi has that brought in? I'm sure it has. Maybe it hasn't, but
Hmm.
I mean, you were raised here. You sound as American as I do,
I
but
am. Yep.
with a very Middle Eastern name, has that
Been an issue?
given you any? Yeah, has it been an
To
issue?
be honest, not at all. That's one thing
Awesome.
that I have not faced at all. I know friends of mine that might have had that issue, but the way I approach it is people are people. If you are honest, open, and you mean well and you try to do your best the best you can, people look over. And we have a president named Obama, you know, you know, Barack Hussein Obama. We elected that person and with the middle name Hussein. So I think if the American public can elect someone with that middle name as the president of the United States, hopefully we're getting beyond some of the sensitivities and the prejudices of having a different or sounding name than everyone else.
Yeah, one of my best friends in college, his last name was Khalik.
Mm,
His dad was from Jordan and his mom was Colombian.
mm-hmm,
And he told, I mean, let's see, I was in college just a few years after September 11th, and he faced some issues.
interesting.
Um, and so I'm glad that it has not
Yes,
impacted you because um, you're such a nice
I
guy. We
appreciate it.
met, for everybody that knows, we had gone to a breakfast meeting at New Media Expo across the street, and it was probably 300 or 400 yards from the hotel we were all staying at in the convention center. And Arfan and I actually met crossing the street.
Yeah,
I think it was really cold that day, and
yeah,
the big group of us had left, and so I'm glad that hasn't affected you, but I hear stories all the time.
yes.
A friend of mine was African American, or he still is African American,
All right.
and he had talked about some of the challenge he'd
Hmm.
faced, and he's 27, 28, something like that. And it I was kind of curious
Yeah.
because well, maybe I'm the only one,
Well,
but
what's interesting is I think we all have certain prejudices and certain stereotypes. You know, stereotypes are a way for us to make sense of the world in a simple way. You know, I live in South Carolina. That's the South, right? And even moving down to the South, my questions are, wait a second, am I going to be discriminated against? Is it going to be um, people tolerant in the South? You know, I've never lived. I mean, I live in Miami, right? Which is not the South in terms of culturally and but those are things we all think about. But when I moved here, I was refreshingly surprised by the openness and tolerance and openness to new ideas and genuine curiosity about someone that has a different sounding name and maybe looks a little different, but that genuinely wants to, help other people professionally and personally. And so, again, I think we all have those stereotypes and prejudices, but the question is, are we questioning them appropriately? And is it getting in the way of us reaching out and building relationships with people that are different from us so we can learn from that diversity?
yeah, absolutely. We all bring in our own history to whatever interaction it is, and
Hmm.
we have to learn to change it. So I agree.
Absolutely.
Um, what does a typical day look like for you? You still have, or you have a corporate
I
or a
do.
business job? You got the podcast.
Hmm.
You've got a family. What does a normal day look like for
Yeah,
you?
it's a full day. So my alarm goes off around 5:30. I'm a big proponent of having a morning ritual. You know, so I get up, I try to write every day and reflect and think about what are my goals for the day. I try to go for a walk, if it's not too cold outside. Just find it a morning walk really refreshing for me to get my mind going. And then I go to my full-time job. So I'm director of learning development at a regional bank in the Southeast United States, and I've got my full day. I come back, and after work, a lot of my time is spent, playing with my son, working on the podcast, and other projects that I have going on. But it's definitely a full day for me.
What other projects do you have that you're working on?
Really, most of it is the podcast. I've got, of course, LionSage.com, which is the website with all the show notes of the podcast, and just really thinking about the future of content creation, other interviewers that would love to be able to tap into their wisdom, and future, pieces of content that I'd like to publish to the podcasting medium. So that's the most of the stuff I'm doing these days.
Now, on your podcast, do you talk most? I know, we've talked about brand building, and that's part of what your podcast is about. Is that something that you talk about a lot on your show?
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically, again, I look at branding from that more generic definition of everything that touches your reputation professionally. And so we get into the career stuff, the career development, how people perceive you, how do you network effectively, how do you build a network of brand advocates, people that are going to talk about you behind your back in a positive light. Um, how do you overcome the intimidation of speaking up in high profile meetings? Because a lot of us have that inner fear of saying something dumb, right? So I talk about case studies on different situations I've worked with people on in a one-on-one coaching basis, but also I love to bring on great interviewees that could also talk about their experiences with this overall topic of brand building for young professionals.
Very cool. Arfan, what was the last movie you saw?
Last movie. I think it was Catching Fire, The Hunger Games. I think episode number two.
What'd you think?
I actually liked it. It was a cliffhanger. I'm waiting for number three. Haven't read the books yet, but I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. The first one. My wife's read the
Hmm.
books, and for Christmas or birthday or something, I bought her the collections
Nice.
collector's edition. It had the little plaque. She really wanted a T-shirt, but so we
Next
like
best thing.
those. Yeah, exactly. We like those movies too. What is one tip or piece of advice that you can give people who maybe aren't quite sure about their personal brand
Mhm.
or looking to start something new? What's one tip or piece of advice that you can give them?
I would say for starters, the usual challenge we have with starting is we have these really elaborate plans, right? So we sit down with our Excel sheets or our piece of paper, whatever it is, and we plan out in this linear standpoint the next 6 months to a year. And it's exciting, right? So it's kind of like that New Year's resolution of I'm going to work out every day for 2 hours, or I'm going to work on my podcast or blog or whatever it might be for your brand. And then one thing, one day, throws you off. So maybe you can't do your plan for that day, and the whole thing is sort of off the rails. That's an issue. So finishing what you start and sustaining it. If you're building a brand, if you're building a business or anything in life, any big project that's long term, you've got to sustain that effort over time, right? So one tip I would give to starters with that challenge is for that project or goal, pick the one most important recurring action that's going to move it forward. So for example, if you're writing an ebook, that's your project or side hustle, then the one most important action to move forward is writing, right? That's the one thing. If it's losing weight, then the one most important thing maybe for you, exercise or diet. But turn that recurring action into a habit. And a habit is something you do every day. It has some triggers, but you do it every day on autopilot. And if you can now pick that one action that's going to move forward, and you do it every day, and if you do it every day as early as possible, not sure why it works, but it works. I mean, Benjamin Franklin, Ernest Hemingway, a lot of people that have done great things tend to get up early and do that one thing as early as possible, so that life doesn't get in the way, which it always will. But when you do that every day with a minimum action, you're going to make progress over the long term. And you're going to surpass other people that start and stop their passion project or their progress on their dreams. So build good habits. Build great habits that are going to last a lifetime, and you will see fruition very, very quickly.
Oh yeah, that's great, and I think that's a common theme that I get when I ask that question to people is start doing something on a regular basis. So great tip. Arfan, if someone wanted to reach out and say thanks for hanging out with Ellery and being on the Empowered podcast, where can I send them to thank you and connect with you?
Yeah, probably the best thing is either lionsage.com or my Twitter, which is at ArfanQ. That's at ARF as in Frank, AN as in Nancy, Q as in Queen.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Ellie. The pleasure is all mine.
Man, wasn't that a cool episode? I love how Arfan said the stories other people tell about you determine your brand. They tell you what your brand is because they've seen you in action. And that's exactly what a personal brand is, or brand of any kind. You know, one of the references that I always talk about is Coca-Cola. When you think of Coca-Cola, what do you think of? You know, they've got the distinctive red can. They actually own or copyright that symbol or that silhouette that's on the can, but it's the glass bottle. Whenever you think of these brands, McDonald's, Burger King, these big things, what do you think of? Well, here's an interesting question. What do you think of when you think of McDonald's versus what do you think of when you hear the term In-N-Out Burger? They're the same thing. You would describe them almost the exact same way. You know, they're different, but they each have a different brand. And each person that you know, and you listening to this right now, you have a very unique and distinct personal brand. The stories people tell about you are a reflection of that brand. And if it's not what you want, you have the ability to change it. It may be an uphill battle for you. It may be harder for me than it is for you, but we can definitely and absolutely change our personal brands. To help you with that, I have a couple products. I sometimes pitch products or mention products that I have. I have a personal branding toolkit. You can buy it on my website right now. It walks you through the process of defining your personal brand, helping you out with a resume, helping you tweak your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook profile, I don't have anything on Twitter yet. I did not incorporate Twitter into this brand whenever I wrote it. I'm working on a revised version that will include Twitter, but it's not in there right now. Or if you know you're not ready for that investment and you want kind of just to get an idea of what your personal brand is, I have a personal brand assessment. The link's in the show notes. If you go to empoweredpodcast.com/34, there's a link to where I will do a personal brand assessment. I'll do it myself. I do all of my work myself. But I will take a look at how your brand, your name, your reputation looks online. I will score it. I already have the scoring criteria and everything. It's not going to be some subjective thing where I'm like, oh well, I'm going to give this guy some extra credit points. It's very objective. I have it outlined, and I will return a score to you based on 1 to 10. You get an 8 or a 9. I actually got a 9.8, but I've been very intentional, and mine's not even perfect. So there's a way to get a perfect score, but I have not achieved it yet, and it's my own algorithm. And you can find that at empoweredpodcast.com/34. You can also find a link to grab the personal branding toolkit. One person told me that using the skills and the tools in this toolkit, she got a 3x increase in the number of responses she got from her resume. That's pretty impressive, and I know for a fact that she's gotten 2 new jobs. This has been 2 jobs ago for her, 2 new jobs since she started using the advice that I put in that book. So it's pretty cool. Also, I wanted to mention one blog post that I did write this week that oddly enough pertains very much to personal branding, and it was how an identity crisis helped me figure out who I really am. And it's a question that I'll ask you too, is who are you and what do you want to be known for? Those are things that are also incorporated into your personal brand. You can find that at ElleryWells.com, and the title of that post is how an identity crisis helped me figure out who I really am. And maybe you've gone through a similar process. The last thing that I wanted to mention for you is I have a second podcast that I launched a few weeks ago called the Choose Yourself Podcast. It's short 5 to 15 minute episodes. Most of them are less than 15 minutes. They're digestible, easy, actionable podcasts that you can listen to really put yourself in the driver's seat, to really take control of your own life and your destiny. The tagline for that show is to become the master of your destiny and the architect of your success. And that's what I really want for you, is for you to become the master of your future, to dictate what will happen. There's a quote out there that says, if it will be, it's up to me. And that's what I want to help you out with this show. The Empowered Podcast, the one you're listening to right now, they usually run 45 minutes to an hour or so. This one, I really wanted to make it about 15 minutes or less. It's a Monday through Friday show. You can find that information. I'll put a link in the show notes, but if you are at ElleryWells.com, on the menu there's a section now for podcasts, or you can go to ElleryWells.com/podcasts with an S, and you can see a description of both of those shows, or both this show and that show. There's links for iTunes and Stitcher, and love for you to check that out. Leave me a rating, review, and tell somebody about it. Right now, that show is not in iTunes. They have an issue with my feed, and they're taking forever to get back to me. I could cancel the show and resubmit it with a new URL and be done in 24 hours, but they told me not to do that. So I'm trying to be a good podcaster, good content creator, and follow their instruction, and they're being a royal pain in the mule, if you get my analogy there. Anyway, this has been another fantastic episode of the Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Ellery Wells. I can't wait to talk to you next time.